Turn now to Mr. Perkins, who's joining us online. You have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Commissioner. I'd like to ask you about the Basharian report that you issued on the Liberal Green Slush Fund SDTC. You, in the report, acknowledge that you were aware of the parliamentary hearings as well as the Auditor General's work in this area. Is that correct?
Yes.
Then you were aware then that the Auditor General, as part of a report, identified 9 Order in Council appointments to the board who had voted conflict of interest, not just the one in Mr. Barrett's letter. And earlier you said that you only dealt with Order in Council appointments. Will you look at the other 8? Those 8 voted 186 times out of 400 times, 400 votes, 400 transactions, 186 conflicted, 44%, and those 9 directors. That's not bad legal advice. That's a culture of conflict of interest.
Would you please repeat your question exactly? I want to make sure that I misunderstand you.
The Auditor General identified 9 Order in Council directors, 186 times voted conflict of interest. Out of 400 transactions, that's 44% Order in Council appointments, almost half of the money, $330 million. They voted companies they had a conflict of interest in. That's not bad legal advice, as you suggested in your report, is it? That's a culture on the board of conflict of interest, of self-dealing. Would you look at all 9 directors in those instances of conflict of interest?
Let's get the facts straight. I was asked to look at 2 Order in Council appointments, and I looked at them and their activities.
From Mr. Barrett, sorry, Commissioner, that was from Mr. Barrett's letter. Yeah. You have the ability to investigate beyond being asked, I would assume. And in that, Ms. Basharian also voted herself, and you didn't cover this, or the board gave her companies $10 million, $10.4 million actually, from companies she had an interest in: Hydrostar, Cascadia, Seaweed Corp, Margrove Lithium, and Resonant money. Those are outside of the COVID payments. Did you look at those?
Are you suggesting that she did not recuse herself? Are you suggesting that she voted?
I'm suggesting she created a culture of conflict of interest with 9 directors all voting themselves half of the money from the Green Slush Fund, and you haven't looked at it. I want to know why you're not looking at probably the largest scandal in terms of dollars in conflict of interest, not only in this government, but in decades.
Michael, why don't you?
Yeah, I think I'll jump in here. The report makes clear that the Commissioner did examine every vote of every meeting in which Ms. Verschuren was the chair. So we didn't name specific companies that were the ultimate beneficiaries. The focus of the examination, in large part, was the involvement of accelerators in which Ms. Verschuren was associated. So the Verschuren Center and Mars Discovery District, who were nominating other companies for funding. So in that regard, we have a breakdown.
But that's only one aspect. I'm sorry, but that's all. I have limited time. That's only one aspect, and I'm curious as to why you're not looking into the broader issue of the $400 million scandal. The Auditor General identified $330 million of conflicts. One director who sat on the board and time on the board had from Quebec named André-Lise Matteau has $97 million go to companies she has venture capital interests in. That's all been identified on the time. 9 directors in the Auditor General report, all Order in Council appointees. Why are you not investigating those conflicts?
You know, Order in Council appointees come in 2 varieties. You have reporting public office holders and you have public office holders. Public office holders are those who have to comply by the act, but they do not have to at the beginning of their appointment. They don't have to come to us, show what they owe, and then follow the rules.
That wasn't my question.
I hear you, but I'm trying to give you the context. You're pushing me a question, and you're doing it on the basis of of facts that you think there has been a lot of misbehavior and you are not investigating. I'm looking at
in the
the
Auditor
people who have
General's report.
reporting public officers. While we were doing the investigation of Madame Michoud and Mr. Winnet, the Auditor General did her report. Her report came out long after we had finished investigating these.
So why aren't you investigating
Mr.
the
Perkins, I'm
results of
afraid that
report?
is the time. You, I'm sure, have another opportunity. This, I expect, suivant, c'est Madame Sinclair-Desgagnés pour 2 minutes.
Up next is Ms. Sinclair-Desgagnés for 2.5 minutes, please. Thank you, Mr. Chair. All my colleagues have referred to Sustainable Development Canada. Just a second.
Order in this chamber, please. Madame Sinclair-Desgagnés, pouvez-vous...
Ms. Sinclair-Desgagnés, can you please take it from the top? 2.5 minutes. Okay, I will start from the beginning. I fully understand, of course, take some time. I will reset the clock when you're ready for 2.5 minutes. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Now, when it comes to Sustainable Development Technology Canada, a lot of colleagues referred to the situation, and you published a report. So I have a question about that. There are some parts of the report where you say that Madame Michoud possibly acted in the manner that she thought would take care of or resolve of her conflict of interest. So she abstained rather than recusing herself. Is that the case?
No?
Oui.
Yes. Did you hear my question? Yes, your summary is quite on point. Okay, thank you. Well, what I'm curious about in all that, Commissioner, is that these are these appointed people, individuals. Do they not follow a training on conflict of interest? Well, it really depends on the organization. If the organization has a legal counsel, they would normally explain to them what the rules and expectations are and what kinds of behaviors are expected of them to avoid conflicts of interest, etc. But if the organization chooses to have an information session on conflict of interest, well, in this very specific case, in this case of this individual, when they assumed their position, did they not receive training about the expected behavior and ways of avoiding conflicts of interest? Well, not from us. No, but in general, because that's quite important. Because if there's no training, then it's quite problematic because they are in charge of public funds. And if there was a training, well, if they followed the training like many other people do, how can we assume that they're acting out of goodwill? Because these are people occupying very important positions on different boards where financing is attributed. Well, how can we know that they did not maybe fully understand the or digest the information? If that is the case, we have a serious problem. Well, listen, clearly I do not know the details of what happened at SDTC and what the information was that was made available to members of the board. We have very limited information. I find it very hard to imagine that they did not have a training session with Madame Michoud, because that's normal in every organization. It's a question of finding out what exactly happened with the different members of the board, because there were a certain number of cases where she was informed that there was a conflict of interest. She took that into account, but she did not recuse herself. So that is a technical violation, if you will, and the Act is clear on that. You need to recuse yourself. She declared the conflict of interest, but she voted still. Okay, thank you very much.
Desjardins, you have the floor for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you again, Commissioner, for being present to answer questions related to SDTC. I know that you're unlikely given notice about these questions, and so I do appreciate your comments now on the topic. So, it was earlier identified, and my colleague, Ms. Sinclair de Gagné, did mention an aspect of the question I wish to pose, which is related to Ms. Verchuren denying claims of conflict, saying that she got legal counsel or legal advice, that she did not have to recuse herself because her firm was a group of 100 companies that received the same level of additional funding. You know, we obviously know now that that's not the case and shouldn't have happened. But can you respond to her claims and tell the committee why her case is still relevant under the Conflict of Interest Act?
It's relevant, I think, as a lesson to other companies, etc. Follow the rules that are set out for you in the Act and in your own company, in the company's own code of conduct. If you follow them, there's no problem. If you have a situation like we had with COVID and saying because it's an emergency now and because all the companies get it, not only the one company which you have interest, therefore in conflict of compliance, follow your own judgment. It's look, you're going to benefit from it, so let's get out of here and let's not vote on it. So in that case, you're clean free, and that's really the message from all of this. No matter what. You have the rules, follow them, and you're clear free. Anybody telling you it doesn't apply in this case, look at it with a great deal of caution.
No, thank you very much for that, Commissioner. I think that's the most important lesson from this situation is that the conflict of interest, regardless of whether or not one attempts to avoid accountability, and that the recusal portion of that admission is most critical to ensuring that that person, in this case, Ms. Verchuren, could understand directly that conflict. Isn't that correct? That the process, the recusal process, doing that is the most important piece to understanding one's own conflict or perceived conflict, correct?
Yeah, correct.
And I also know that there has been trainings, there are ways that this information gets to public servants or even to others. Is this something that you think your office could enhance its work in doing, is ensuring that officials like Ms. Verchuren and others in like positions in these boards of management understand these rules of recusal better?
You can always improve on what you do, obviously. What we do right now, like somebody like Verchuren, she gets appointed. The first thing, she gets a letter from us saying, welcome to you. Please fill out this a very extensive questionnaire so we can go then sit down with you and find out if you have a conflict and what has to be done. That happens. Then there are some certain steps taken, most usually either establishing screens or insisting on blind trust, etc. And then we say, this is your advisor. She is there for you, and if you have any problem, call her. She will tell you. Okay, and then if there is an issue, she calls, and we will help her resolve the issue. So we do that. Secondly, if the organization asks, can you do a briefing session on conflict of interest for our board members? We'll gladly do that. We'll send somebody over to two people and walk through. So we're trying to do as much as possible. But the main thing is that you have to be aware of it. If you are in these positions, these are public trust positions, the rules apply and they will be enforced. And if you are in doubt whether there is, call us or don't vote. You know, if you think there's a possibility of conflict of interest, it usually is. You know, so
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you.